Group Session 8, The Challenge of Memory. Quote, "If there's any way you guys can get me a different brain, I'd appreciate it." End quote. Kurt. The idea of reading about traumatic memory may evoke some anxiety for you. After all, it's disturbing memories that many people want to avoid. So, here's a message of reassurance. We are going to be exploring this area in a gentle and gradual way. Also, this chapter will hopefully normalize difficulties you may have with traumatic memories. We will explore the difference between normal memory and traumatic memory and understand why traumatic memories can feel like a challenging issue. We will look at the difference between protecting yourself from memories and processing memories, and explain why it's important to be able to do both. We hope this chapter will aid your understanding and provide you with more confidence in managing the effects of traumatic memories. Appreciating the complexity of traumatic memories. A traumatic event is a frightening experience in which a person experiences physical or emotional harm or the threat of harm. Attacks on one's physical safety or sense of self can be traumatic. Trauma involves serious stress which overwhelms an individual's capacity to cope or to integrate emotions and sense-making. In this respect, childhood physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, neglect, or abandonment is normally traumatizing. The emphasis here is on the word normally. When children experience significant threats, it is normal for such experiences to have traumatic effects, including traumatic memories. Traumatic memories can be thought of as a normal consequence of highly abnormal events. Dealing with traumatic memories can be one of the most difficult and yet important aspects of recovery. Most people who experience childhood harm appreciate that there are memories of what happened that are problematic. In a sense, the problem of childhood trauma is the problem of traumatic memories. What's different about someone who grew up with safety and love from someone who grew up with experiences of threat? Well, obviously, the experiences are different, but the experiences happened in the past. What is different today is that traumatic memories live on in the individual who experienced harm. The legacy of childhood trauma is kept alive for adults through memories encoded in the brain, felt in the body, and represented in the habitual ways the individual thinks about self, others, and life. However, the way in which individuals are affected by traumatic memories is complex and can vary from one person to the next. Many do struggle directly with re-experiencing of traumatic memories. If you recall, in a previous chapter, we explored complex traumatic stress disorder, or CPTSD, a common diagnosis for those who experienced childhood harm. There were 6 features of this diagnosis, one of which is referred to as re-experiencing. Re-experiencing occurs when intrusive and unwanted memories of a traumatic event come into a person's mind. The memories often come with difficult emotions, distressing physical sensations, and disturbing thoughts. An individual may respond by avoiding events, people, or places which might trigger re-experiencing. If re-experiencing comes with very powerful physical sensations and emotions, and the person loses contact with the present moment, isn't sure what is real, or even feels that something awful is happening again, this is called a flashback. A flashback can be scary. Only some individuals who encounter childhood trauma experience flashbacks, and if this has not happened to you by now, it probably won't. Nightmares can be thought of as re-experiencing when asleep, often in symbolic form. Whether re-experiencing occurs through intrusive images, flashbacks, or nightmares, the individual is dealing with significant emotional and body-based distress connected to memories. While re-experiencing as described above is quite common, it's just not that simple. There are others who can recall events and talk about what occurred, but they seem disconnected from the emotion or physical sensations that ought to be a feature of the memories. In therapy sessions, they might tell you about awful childhood or adult experiences through deadpan expressions, almost as if what occurred happened to someone else. This does not mean that they were unaffected by events or that traumatic memories are not an issue. It can mean that the emotional and sensory content is disconnected from the memory of what occurred. Some of these individuals can struggle with depression or distress they feel in their bodies. And the complexity of traumatic memory does not end there. Certain individuals can really struggle to recall traumatic memories, and they can feel quite confused about the past. They may have a sense of abuse or neglect occurring, or they were told about such events by others, but there are significant gaps in memory. In more extreme cases, certain traumatic memories are completely repressed in ways that the individual does not consciously direct. However, memories that are repressed or lost can resurface later in life. The issue of recovered memories was controversial at one point, but we can now be quite sure that this is a genuine phenomenon. For some, it really is possible to remember an event later in life that had been unconsciously repressed. And when this occurs, people need to be believed. Recovered memories can occur with any form of trauma, but appear to be especially likely in instances of childhood sexual abuse. Again, difficulties in recalling what happened or total repression does not mean that trauma memory isn't significant. What can't be recalled can be experienced within the body and emotions, or acted out through difficulties in relationships or coping. Here is another complexity to consider. How difficult traumatic memories are can vary for a particular individual over time. For periods in their lives, often when things are going better or they are in a good relationship, traumatic memories may ease up or even disappear. But if a person faces new stressors, experiences a relationship loss, or encounters something from their past, traumatic memories can wake up for a period of time. This was the case for Marianne, who had been physically abused by her stepfather. Quote, "My relationship to John, partner, was great, and I was really focused on training as a massage therapist. I was doing so well. And then I saw him, her stepfather. I thought he was living up north, or maybe even dead, and suddenly there he was, walking in the high street. And all these memories started coming back to me." End quote. Fortunately, this was a temporary setback for Marianne, and with support from her partner and friends, she regained control over re-experiencing. However, her experience illustrates how memories can recede and then wake up. The fact that traumatic memories can be experienced so differently from one individual to the next can also relate to how people have tried to cope with the problem. There are many different ways individuals can attempt to suppress or push memories away. Examples can include drug and alcohol misuse, manic behavior, perfectionism, eating disordered behavior, OCD, or deliberate self-harm. It's not unusual for individuals to present initially to mental health services with the above issues, which then need to be traced back to childhood harm and associated traumatic memories. We are going to be exploring traumatic memory in ways which will hopefully support you in developing insight and your recovery. However, here is an important thought. Clinicians and researchers have made some useful discoveries about the problem of traumatic memories and what can help, which we will explore. However, given the complexity of this issue, we will not be explaining how traumatic memory works for you or what you should necessarily do about it. It will be necessary for you to see what you can identify with and explore the best way to use certain ideas or strategies. Traumatic memory and normal memory. Let's consider the way memory normally works in the case of non-traumatic events. Suppose you go to a birthday party. It's a nice event with largely pleasant emotions and low stress. The event is likely to be properly processed and stored away in memory. What does this mean? It means that, 1, you were connected to the event when it was happening. 2, you are not overwhelmed by physical sensations and powerful feelings like fear, terror, disgust, or rage. You had access to both your emotional brain, limbic system, and your thinking brain, prefrontal lobe. 3, because your emotional brain and thinking brain were online and working together, the birthday party events were encoded into memory in a straightforward way. These memories can be recalled and form the basis of a coherent story you can think about or explain to others without problems. Traumatic memory tends to operate differently from normal memory in a couple of ways. First, there is a difference in the level of emotional and physiological arousal when we experience traumatic events. Adrenaline is released when we experience a threat, resulting in memories being strongly encoded. The fact that we strongly encode threatening events in memory is our mind's way of trying to ensure safety in the future. As well intentioned as traumatic memory is meant to be, there is often a real problem with how it works later in life. Traumatic memories may keep reoccurring when we are quite safe. For some individuals, they show up in nightmares, often in symbolic form. The memory of the pleasant birthday is something we might think about occasionally, and we do not feel compelled to re-experience it. Rather than acting as a helpful guide and protecting us from further problems, memories of trauma have become a problem. Second, how traumatic memories get stored can work differently than non-traumatic memories. Memory involves storage systems, the thalamus and hippocampus, our emotional brain, or the limbic system, and thinking brain, or the prefrontal lobe. With normal memory, these systems are integrated and work together to process and store away experiences in a coherent way, as with the pleasant birthday party. If an event is threatening, our emotional brain may take over while our thinking brain gets shut down. We experience shock and powerful physical sensations and get flooded by emotions such as fear, terror, disgust, or anger or rage. The sympathetic nervous system we discussed in an earlier chapter gets activated. Images and powerful physical responses and emotions can be stored away, but without access to our thinking brain during the event, we may not have a coherent story. The storage of the memory can be fragmented and laden with disturbing emotional and sensory aspects. By shutting off our thinking brain, we are defending ourselves by repressing or dissociating from some of what is happening. Repression or dissociation are ways of cutting yourself off from the event so that you don't experience the full awfulness of it. If you recall the traumatic memory today, you may experience emotions and physical sensations, but might find it hard to access a coherent and helpful story about what happened. It's common for people who experienced childhood harm to tell us that their traumatic memories come to them in flashes or fragmented bits rather than in a chronological way. Because of this, some can feel upset about having difficulties recalling events in a coherent way, and they may worry that others won't believe them if they can't describe it confidently. These individuals need to be believed and to feel reassured that they are recalling what happened as well as they can. This is how traumatic memory often works, but it can go in another direction as well. If an individual was truly overwhelmed by a terrifying event, it's possible that their thinking brain and emotional brain got switched off. They can be deep in a dorsal vagal response where everything is shutting down for protection. The experience will certainly have impacted them, but they may have limited or no access to the events, emotions, or physical sensations. This can sometimes explain the confused and deadpan descriptions we sometimes hear from clients. It can also explain the fact that a memory can be lost and then recovered later in life. So, when an individual experiences trauma, the emotional and thinking parts of the brain found it hard to work together so that a memory could get stored away in an integrated and coherent fashion. In other words, the event wasn't processed thoroughly at the time. The result is that later in life, the individual does not simply recall the event, they may re experience it. The images often come with the same old feelings of fear, terror, anger, shame, etc. In a sense, the individual is going through it again. The individual is not able to look back on the event with a sense of distance. The memory can feel frozen in time. The sense an adult may make of the event, the story they tell themselves, may also be frozen in time. They may still, in certain ways, explain what happened through the eyes of the child. Many people who experience childhood harm feel badly that they are continuing to struggle with traumatic memories well into adulthood. For this reason, it's important to make the point that such individuals are not weak or failing. They are struggling with traumatic memories because this is what childhood trauma produces. The problem of traumatic memory is better thought of as a condition rather than a choice. No one who experienced childhood harm gets up in the morning and decides they are going to have distressing and intrusive memories that elicit emotional and body based distress, undermines their sense of self, and pushes them towards unhelpful coping. When it comes to considering traumatic memories, self compassion and self acceptance make a lot of sense. Should you protect yourself or process traumatic memories? This is a common question those who experience childhood harm can ask. Let's look at what we mean by protecting yourself from memories and processing memories. By protecting yourself from traumatic memories, we simply mean exerting control so you are not getting harmed or re traumatized by them. This can include, for example, deciding not to deal with memories at a particular time. Processing traumatic memories is a term that clinicians and researchers use. It just means allowing yourself to recall events, safely experience sensations and emotions attached to memories, and to think about, talk about, or write about what happened. Processing traumatic memories means allowing yourself to experience them, but in a way which is relatively safe and hopefully allows for better integration of emotions and thoughts. That story we tell about what happened. Before we look at protecting yourself from memories versus processing memories, let's explore a bit further why traumatic memories can be such a problem. For many, re-experiencing childhood events through memory can feel like a trap. For some, these memories can be intrusive, and the individual may feel compelled to re-experience them. The memory feels harmful and difficult to get away from. As one client we knew put it, quote, "It's like having to listen to this extremely annoying person saying the same horrid things over and over again. It's like, shut up already," end quote. On the other hand, some will find ways of strongly suppressing traumatic memories. They may blot out memories through substance misuse, manic behavior, self harm, filling their mind with noise, or other behaviors. If you constantly push away or suppress trauma, trauma often expresses itself indirectly through generalized anxiety, nightmares, or through the body, e.g., headaches, frozen muscles, fibromyalgia, IBS, etc. The trap looks like this. Re experiencing traumatic memories can feel disturbing, but running from traumatic memories can be exhausting. We mentioned Donald earlier, a man who was emotionally abused by his parents. He provided us with an analogy which beautifully illustrates the dilemma of traumatic memory. Quote, "I don't want to remember what happened, and I know I have all sorts of ways of forcing it out of my head, but it can be exhausting. It's like I'm standing in this swimming pool and I'm pushing a large ball under the water. I can't see the ball, but I can feel it pushing itself back up. And after a while, your arms get tired." End quote. So suppressing or running from the memories doesn't get rid of them. On the other hand, it's no good allowing yourself to get flooded by distressing memories that leave you feeling out of control, make living your daily life very hard, give you panic attacks, etc. Many people intuitively know that suppressing memories doesn't get rid of them, yet they can be very anxious about facing them. Let's return to our original question. Are you supposed to protect yourself from these memories, or are you supposed to face and process these memories? We believe you should be able to do both. Sometimes it's important for you to control and protect yourself from memories. However, it's also important to process memories when possible, to safely recall what happened, allow for manageable emotions and sensations, think about, talk about, and make sense of it in ways that can help you feel stronger. Below, we explore methods of protecting yourself, and we will look at informal and formal ways of processing memories. Protecting yourself from traumatic memories. Recovering from a traumatic childhood will require being able to face what happened in childhood. However, there are times when it's better to protect yourself from memories. Why might it be important to protect yourself, and when might you want to do this? There are three ways of answering this question. 1. You might be having intrusive memories at a time when you need to function or help someone else. It's just the wrong time to experience and think about childhood memories. 2. There may be times when you feel that a particular memory is too disturbing and you are worried about being overwhelmed. This can sometimes be the case if an intrusive memory comes back with very distressing emotions and physical reactions. It is always the case with flashbacks. A flashback is something to manage and protect yourself from. Jerry was physically and emotionally abused by his father. He told us, quote, "I can think about a lot of what happened when I was growing up, but there are a few memories which, if I remember that, I feel like I'm being mugged." End quote. At this stage in his recovery, those were memories he needed to protect himself from. 3. There is evidence that the more you think about something or recall a memory, the stronger that memory becomes. This is helpful if we are studying for a test or want to improve our tennis serve. However, recalling a traumatic memory over and over again can also strengthen the memory trace. Making progress with childhood trauma does require being able to access memories safely in order to develop insight and create change. But recalling a traumatic memory numerous times is not required. If you are repetitively recalling a distressing memory in ways which does not support insight or recovery, this isn't helping you to move forward. So, if you realize that you need to protect yourself from a disturbing memory or a flashback, what can you do? Below are some strategies to consider. Perhaps some will appeal to you more than others. Practicing them when you need to can provide feedback about what works best. Distance yourself from a memory. Sometimes an intrusive memory can come out of the blue, and it's difficult to know what triggered it. Other times it's quite obvious what is triggering the memory. If you feel it's best to protect yourself from the memory, you can get distance from the memory. If the trigger is something you hear on TV or radio, you may want to turn it off or switch the channel. If you see someone in the street that triggers you, you may want to avoid them. If it is something in a magazine you are reading, you just may want to put it down. Many will do this naturally as it just makes sense. Use an anchoring object. Intrusive images or flashbacks pull you out of the present moment and into the interior world of memory. Some people will use an anchoring object, sometimes called a grounding object. It's ideal if the object is something small enough to fit into a pocket or purse. If the object has personal and pleasant associations, that helps. It might be a small stone, a gift from someone important to you, a ring, a small stuffed animal, etc. If it's a good time to protect yourself from intrusive memories or a flashback, then holding, feeling, and looking at the object can get you out of your head and into the world again. Using movement. When a person is sucked into an intrusive memory or a flashback, it can feel like everything stops. The world disappears, and a person might find themselves immobilized and staring into space as the memory gets hold of them. Getting yourself moving can help. Walking, singing, stretching, or yoga, etc., can work. Intrusive memories or flashbacks disconnect you from your body and the world. Movement can shift you out of the internal space of memory and get you reconnected. Grounding exercises. We introduced the technique of grounding during the introductory pages, but it can be such a useful strategy, it's worth highlighting again. Grounding can be handy for intrusive memories, but it's especially useful for flashbacks. Anytime you struggle with flashbacks or strong intrusive memories, you can circle back to the grounding exercises we described in the previous section entitled Preparing for a Safe and Productive Experience. As mentioned, some people find it helpful to write out the text of a grounding exercise and keep it with them at all times. Reassure yourself strongly. Intrusive thoughts and flashbacks can leave individuals feeling that something awful is happening right now and that they won't be able to cope. They need reassurance that they will get through it. Michelle was prone to strong intrusive memories and even flashbacks when she was strongly triggered. To prepare herself for these moments, she wrote a reassuring statement on a 3 by 5 inch card that she kept in her purse and would read if she had a powerful intrusive memory. Her text went like this: "What's happening is not real. This is just a strong memory I'm having. This is really upsetting, but I'm safe and nothing bad is happening to me. It happened a long time ago and it's not happening now. I'm completely safe right now. This will get easier in a few minutes and I will feel okay again." She didn't need to use the card that often, but just having the card with her offered some reassurance. Breathe and relax your muscles. An intrusive traumatic memory will kick breathing and muscular tension into high gear. If you really focus hard on slowing breathing and relaxing your muscles, it serves not only to distract you from the memory, but also to calm down the physical or emotional response. As with grounding, the technique of controlled breathing was discussed in the section entitled Preparing for a Safe and Productive Experience. You can review and practice controlled breathing as a way of protecting yourself from memories. If you can manage it, combining controlled breathing with other strategies found here can help too. Connect with someone you trust. Some people feel most vulnerable to intrusive memories or flashbacks when they are alone. These individuals may feel safer if they get in connection with someone they trust. You don't have to talk about the intrusive memories when you contact someone, unless this works for you. For some, just getting in touch with someone you trust will distract you or minimize the effect of the intrusive images. Pay attention to the world out there. Intrusive thoughts and images are happening in your mind. The world you are experiencing is happening around you, out there. An intrusive thought or image says, forget about what's going out there in the world. Pay attention to what's happening inside your head and body. If now is not the right time to attend to the memory, force your attention outward. Stay connected to reality. The extent you can keep your attention on what you are doing will drain away the power of the intrusive memory. Janet told us about an intrusive memory that occurred while she was washing up. Quote, I was listening to the radio and this song came on. It was a song which was popular when I was young, and it immediately triggered bad memories from when I was a kid. I was going out to my book club soon, and I didn't want to be a mess. I turned the radio over to the news. I focused all my attention on the feel of the warm, soapy water and the dishes and what they were saying on the news. End quote. Exercise 1. Techniques for protecting yourself from memories or flashbacks. We briefly described 8 strategies for protecting yourself from intrusive memories or flashbacks. Some will have more appeal to you than others. Scan back over the headings for each strategy. Which strategies do you intuitively imagine will work best for you? Knowing what will work best can require some practice. When you need to protect yourself, we suggest practicing those strategies you are most drawn to. When you use any skills to protect yourself from a memory, there is space under Exercise 1 in the guidebook to describe how it went. What is meant by processing traumatic memory? Processing a traumatic memory may sound technical or complicated, but it's quite straightforward. Processing traumatic memories involves 1. Recalling a memory, 2. Experiencing manageable emotions and physical sensations attached to the memory, and 3. Thinking about, talking about, or writing about the memory. Through remembering and allowing for feelings and reflection, you may be able to create a more realistic and supportive story about what happened, how you were affected, and who you are. As mentioned, processing traumatic memories is a phrase clinicians use, but if you prefer, it can be thought of as working with or responding to traumatic memories. While processing traumatic memories may not be difficult to understand, it is often difficult to do. We are going to look at what happens when you are processing distressing memories in more detail and explore why it can be so challenging. Also, there are informal ways you can process memories and formal processing strategies that happen when you are working with a qualified therapist. We will explore both. As mentioned, when a person experiences a shocking event, the emotional brain can take over. The thinking brain can shut down, and the memory can get stored away without a coherent story about what took place. So, processing traumatic memory involves remembering, having access to some feelings, and being able to construct a story which is helpful and healing. Constructing the story can involve thinking about it, talking about it, writing about it, or even drawing or painting about it. In other words, you are trying to integrate feeling and thinking. You are putting it back together, but in a way which is tolerable and supports a coherent and healing story. While this process is important and can support healing, it is normally challenging. Let's explore some of the common issues. First, just having access to memories stored in the hippocampus can be difficult. Traumatic events may have happened many years ago, and you may have dissociated, cut off from some of what was happening at the time to protect yourself. Second, the emotional brain will very likely have colored traumatic memories with disturbing emotional tones, which can be felt throughout the body. When you recall a traumatic memory, the painful associated emotions and physical sensations can also be present. The main reason those who were harmed avoid memory is because they don't want to re experience these difficult emotions and body based sensations. Third, being able to think, talk, or write about an upsetting memory in healing ways through the use of the frontal lobe can be challenging. Even if a person can begin reflecting on a traumatic memory, previous stories featuring self blame, guilt, shame, etc., may just override more supportive and recovery focused ways of making sense. Robin was a woman who experienced neglect and emotional harm within the family home before being abandoned to an aunt at 8. You can sense in her words that she is struggling to develop a realistic and healing story with respect to memories. Quote, "The fact is, no one wanted me. I was always just a problem. Maybe I shouldn't feel like a reject or ashamed about what happened, but that's just not what my brain tells me." End quote. So, on the one hand, it's important to acknowledge that processing memories can be challenging. On the other hand, if you are able to process memories with reasonable safety, there are good reasons to do it. Let's look at this. Why process memories? If you are going to deal with painful memories, it can be helpful to know what the point is. Why allow yourself to recall an event which was disturbing and has led to a number of psychological problems in later life? Wouldn't it be better to try and never think about what happened again? The problem is that continually forcing the memories away can be exhausting. Recall Martin's description of holding a big ball underwater. An important reason to process traumatic memories is to reduce the negative impacts they are having on your sense of self and life experiences, to feel a greater sense of control. The collegial team of Christine Cortios and Julian Ford are highly respected academic authorities on complex trauma. While discussing the neurobiology of childhood trauma, Cortius made this point, quote, "The true antithesis to intrusive re-experiencing is not freedom from trauma memories or trauma-related distress, but the capacity to choose whether, when, and how to recall and make sense of those memories." End quote. What Cortios means is this. By processing memories, your aim isn't to have complete freedom from intrusive traumatic memories and related distress, but to gain control over these experiences by choosing whether, when, and how to recall and make sense of those memories. By allowing yourself to process painful memories, you are facing those memories. And when you face something you are afraid of, you can take the fear out of it. In a sense, facing distressing memories is no different than facing anything people are frightened of. Spiders, heights, crowded places, water, the dark, public speaking, etc. However, the key is that you not only face what you are afraid of, but also feel relatively safe and successful by facing it. We've discussed intrusive memories and flashbacks, but what about nightmares? At least some nightmares can be considered re-experiencing of traumatic events in symbolic form while you are sleeping. Night terrors are a form of nightmare where an individual may scream, shout, thrash about, fight something, or jump out of bed. Nightmares are one way in which a mind is trying to process traumatic events. If nightmares are a frequent problem and you worry about going to bed or feel tired all day, this may be an argument for processing trauma during your waking hours. We have nightmares about what we suppress or repress during our waking hours. If we can find ways of processing what we are struggling with during our waking hours, we may be less exposed to nightmares while sleeping. Here is another reason why processing trauma matters. For many years, you have been telling yourself a story about who you are, what value you have to others, whether people can be trusted, whether life has a point to it, or whether you are safe in the world. This story very likely continues to be driven by the traumatic memories you still hold. It's as if the traumatic events and the memories they produced are co-writers of this important story you are telling yourself. A feature of processing memories is being able to shape this story about yourself, relationships, and life in healing and self-supportive ways. The goal of processing trauma is integration. As mentioned, while trauma was happening, your emotional brain may have overwhelmed your thinking brain. When you recall the event today, it may therefore come with the old, disturbing, emotional and body-based distress. But there is no realistic and healing story which can support you. This is why it's called re-experiencing. You are re-experiencing the event in a way which can be frozen in time. Processing heals this split between the emotional and thinking brain so they can work together. This may help you feel like you are in one piece. The experience is more integrated. Processing memories takes practice and patience, but with practice can come a growing confidence that you can look at your past with safety, success, and a sense of integration. Processing memories informally. There are formal methods of trauma memory processing that occur when you are working with a qualified therapist. Later in the chapter, we will describe two of these models. For some people, or for certain memories, doing trauma memory processing with a therapist may be a good idea. However, many people can work at processing memories informally, on their own, or with someone they trust. If informally processing traumatic memories seems daunting, here's something which needs saying. Surprise, you're already doing it. In your own way, you've probably been doing it for years. Let's remind ourselves what processing difficult memories involves. 1. Recalling an upsetting memory. This will often happen automatically. You're walking the dog, taking a shower, watching a film, and boom, the memory is there. Or it's possible for you to decide to recall a memory to process. 2. Having access to the emotions and physical sensations which come with the memory, but in a relatively safe and manageable way. 3. Reflecting on and making sense of the memory in a way which feels helpful. This can involve thinking about it, talking about it, or writing. The point is to create a story which feels realistic and healing in respect to the memory. You may not have used language like processing traumatic memory, and you may have not divided it into 3 steps, but it's likely that you can identify with this process. You have probably had many occasions where you find yourself recalling something painful from the past, experiencing associated emotions and physical sensations, and trying to make sense out of it. That's informally processing a traumatic memory. In this respect, processing memories is not new. This chapter may just be supporting you with the challenge from a particular perspective. Also, reading this guidebook and doing related exercises will no doubt stir up difficult memories, associated feelings, and physical sensations. And you will find yourself making sense out of these memories. So, just engaging with the program encourages you to process memories from a number of different perspectives. When might you informally process a painful memory? If the memory just spontaneously appears and it's a safe and good time to deal with it, you can work with it in the moment. Or you can sit down when it's quiet and decide you are going to recall a difficult memory and work with it. You can work with the memory on your own or talk through the process with someone you trust. It may feel weird at first to think of working with memories in this way, but it can feel more natural as you practice. If this all sounds too theoretical, Mary's experience of informally processing a memory may make it feel more real. She described it like this, quote, I was sitting in the car in a supermarket parking lot, and this guy walks by who looked like my stepdad. This memory comes into my head of when I was about 12 and I'd got a bad report card, and my stepdad is just screaming at me, his face all red. I feel scared again and kind of frozen, just sitting in the car remembering it. I can recall how stupid and useless I felt. My breathing is going fast, and I slow it down, breathing deeper. I know I need to see this differently. I'm feeling more angry now at my stepdad, and I think he shouldn't have screamed at me like that. I wasn't stupid. I was having problems learning because I had dyslexia and nobody even knew it. Somebody should have taken the time to talk to me and to help me. I wasn't bad. I just needed help. End quote. This was an intrusive trauma memory that got triggered and happened spontaneously. Mary did some processing right in the moment, and you can see all 3 components of processing at work. She recalls the memory and accesses feelings and physical sensations that happen quite automatically. There were also some quite automatic negative thoughts attached to the memory, such as thinking of herself as useless and stupid. But there is this moment where Mary starts to take control of how she wants to think about the memory, her stepdad, and herself. She begins to see events in a way that is realistic, self-supportive, and healing. She is shaping a story to support her recovery. Concerning this intrusive memory, all Mary needed to do was to think about it in a particular way. In addition, some people may find talking through how they see it with someone they trust helpful, or writing about it. Whether thinking, talking, or writing, you are using your frontal lobe to support processing. The emotional and thinking aspects of your brain are online together. That's integration. Processing means that you are giving new meaning to what happened, which supports you and your recovery and changes how you relate to the memories. Just reliving a memory repeatedly strengthens it and keeps you stuck in the past, unable to free up emotion and energy for the present. This was a distinction which a client really helped us understand. Darnell had been physically and sexually abused by an uncle, making matters worse. As a black child growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood in the 1980s, he'd experienced significant racial abuse. Now in his 50s, at one point, he had worked on shooting commercials. He put it like this, quote, I'd never heard of processing a memory, but it made intuitive sense. It's sort of like working on a set for a commercial shoot. There's a lot going on that is just a part of what needs to happen, but I can also direct the scene in ways that make sense. I have a lot of intrusive memories that just pop up, and at a certain point, I just direct part of it, mostly how I want to think about what happened or how I should feel about it. End quote. So, like Mary, you can process a memory which occurs spontaneously. However, it's also possible to proactively decide to do some processing with a particular memory. You can sit in a quiet place and recall the memory, get in touch with feelings and physical sensations, and then shape your story about how to make sense of it in a realistic and self supportive way. You can talk to someone about your experience or do some writing if you wish. If the memory feels like it has a bit less control over you, you are on the right path. Whether you do some processing for memories which occurs spontaneously or choose to recall a particular memory, there are a couple of guidelines which can help. 1. Work at processing memories when it's practical and you feel safe enough. If it's the wrong time or the memory seems too powerful, then it may be better to access any of the skills for protecting yourself from memories. 2. Keep in mind the distinction between processing a memory and re-experiencing a memory. You will be recalling the memory with some associated feelings and physical sensations, but as Darnell suggests, processing means that you can act as a director. The story you tell through thinking, talking, or writing should support your recovery, not keep you and the memory frozen in the past. Exercise 2. Informal traumatic memory processing. There are 2 ways you can do this exercise. First, you can go about your life and wait for an intrusive memory of past trauma to catch up with you. Depending on who you are, this may take 3 minutes or 3 days, but such experiences are common enough that you probably won't have to wait too long. If it's the right time and you feel safe enough to manage it, see if you can work at processing in the moment. Or, rather than waiting for an intrusive memory to arise spontaneously, you can sit quietly and choose a memory to recall, ensuring it is one you feel you can manage safely. Whether you work with a memory which is arising spontaneously or choose to work with a memory, you will be A. Recalling the event, B. Allowing for tolerable feelings and physical sensations, and C. Working with the thoughts which arise. See if you can work at thinking about the memory in a way which is realistic, self-supportive, and healing. Like Mary's experience depicted above, shape a story of the memory which helps you feel stronger and better about yourself and life. Talk or write about it as well, if that helps you. Whether you process a memory spontaneously or in a planned way, you can use the space under Exercise 2 in the guidebook to describe your experience and anything helpful you may have learned. Formal therapeutic models for trauma memory processing. This chapter suggests that it's important to be able to protect yourself from re-experiencing and develop confidence in informally processing memories. With practice and perseverance, a combination of protection and informal processing may feel adequate for some. However, others may find that re-experiencing is really stuck and painful. If this is the case, you may want to consider seeing a clinician who has specialist training and experience in providing formal therapeutic interventions for traumatic memories. You may want to seek professional clinical help if 1. You are struggling with intrusive traumatic memories frequently. 2. Memories come with intense emotional and physical responses that you just don't feel confident you can deal with on your own or with support from people you trust. 3. You feel strongly compelled to see past events in ways which produce shame, guilt, or self blame. It's just difficult to shift this story on your own. There are a couple of formal models of therapy that have been shown to help certain individuals make progress with re experiencing difficulties. These are models that have a good evidence base. Keep in mind that re experiencing is one of the core problems associated with PTSD. So, if you specifically want professional help with re experiencing, you are asking for help with PTSD. Trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, or TFCBT. Trauma focused CBT has been established for decades, is evidence based, and is one of two recommended therapeutic interventions for PTSD in the UK by the National Institute of Care and Excellence, otherwise known as NICE. Therapy is typically 8 to 25 sessions. There are a variety of techniques which you and your therapist may use. With TFCBT, you will likely be exposing yourself to traumatic memories in a safe and gradual way with a view to processing and overcoming their painful impacts. A therapist offering TFCBT should thoroughly explain from the outset what therapy will involve, the therapist and client's roles, any risks, and potential benefits. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing, or EMDR. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing has been established for many years, is evidence-based, and is recommended for PTSD by NICE. As with TFCBT, an EMDR therapist should thoroughly explain what therapy involves, the therapist and client's role, any risks, and the potential benefits. Clients will be asked to recall traumatic memories while making rapid, precise movements of their eyes that the therapist facilitates. We don't know precisely why EMDR is helpful. However, it's thought that through the use of rapid eye movements and guided instruction, trauma is reprocessed in a manner that allows for a greater sense of control over disturbing emotions and sensations. This ends the audio for the chapter called The Challenge of Memory.